Welcome to Figure Feedback. My name is Jeremy, and today I'm going to be reviewing this gargantuan 3D printer to my right. This is a printer from a company called FLSun. This is the FLSun T1 Pro. Now, let me get a couple things out of the way first. I've seen a lot of different videos about this and other printers from this company, and everyone else calls it FLSun, and that's what I was going to call it too. But then I was watching a live stream, and they were referring to themselves as FLSun, so I'm figuring that's really the way that you're supposed to pronounce it, so I'm going to call it FLSun for this entire video. Now, the second thing that I need to let you know is about disclosures. Now, this printer was not purchased by me. This was sent to me by FLSun so that I can do this video. Now, I am not ignorant to the things that have been going around online talking about FLSun and some of the practices that they've allegedly tried to implement when it comes to the reviews of their printers. So I want you to know, full stop, right out the gate, that I did not agree to anything that they asked me except to review the printer. That means no contracts, no promises about whether something was going to be positive or negative, nothing. I said, you send me the printer and I'm going to give my complete honest opinion about it, and I make you no promises whether or not it's going to be positive or negative. And they respected that choice and they still sent me the printer anyway, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here today. All right, so with all that out of the way, let's start talking about this printer. Now, the obvious elephant in the room is that compared to other printers, this one is kind of like the elephant. This is a big printer. It weighs like 40 pounds, it's more than 2 feet tall, and it's a Delta style printer, which basically means that it looks like an alien is coming down from the top to go down to a circular build plate to print the things that you want it to print. It is a very unique and very cool system, and there's not many printers on the market that aren't made by FLSun that do this same thing. And I think there's a pretty good reason for that. But if you like 3D printers, then you're definitely going to like the way that this thing looks and the way that it operates. Now, one thing that you might not like, especially if you are brand new to this space, is getting it set up, because this model does not come assembled. It comes flat packed into a kit. So you need to spend some time putting it together. It could take you an hour if you're already kind of good at assembling things and you're very confident in your ability to mess around with little tiny fiddly screws and couplers and stuff. But if you are new, or if you're just not that technically inclined to be working with your hands, this could easily take you 2 hours or more to put together, depending on how slow and how careful you want to go. Now, the included instruction manual does a pretty decent job of letting you know how everything goes together, but I myself use that as well as some existing YouTube videos to just sort of help me in some more troublesome spots. And everything has to be assembled. I mean, these panels are separate. This top is separate. There's on the inside, there's a little panel that you have to take off to run the wires up. The effector, which is basically the print head, the little alien thing, that has to be connected. There's little tiny screws that you have to put in, and there's these springs you have to just pull apart in order to fit this little metal part into this other part, so that, I mean, it is involved. All right. So if you don't want to assemble any printer, then don't buy this printer, because you are going to have to assemble it. It's going to take you a while to do. And the natural benefits of doing that is that if you ever have to take anything apart to replace, or even if you just want to do it for fun for some reason, you'll know exactly how to take it apart and how to put it back together. And that knowledge is not wasted knowledge. I think it's very nice and good to know how the printer works, but I also know that there's a lot of people out there who don't care how it works and they just want it to work, you know, like a power drill or something. You know, you just want a tool to be a tool, and you just want it to work. So this is not the model if you want to just kind of dive right in. You're gonna have to put some time into it. All right, so now let's go over some specs, and I got some here on my phone so that I don't forget. Now, first, the price on this printer as I record this video is $549, and I'm going to see if I can get my hands on some type of discount or something for you if you decide to buy it. I don't have one now, but if I do, I'll be sure to leave that down in the description. It's 40 pounds, 2 feet 9 inches tall. Now, as far as the speed goes, the maximum tool head speed on this is 1,000 millimeters per second. That is not the printing speed, okay? So don't think that you're gonna be printing at 1,000 millimeters per second all the time. That's not how it works. The tool head, the effector, things doing all this, that's gonna be moving at a maximum speed of 1,000 millimeters per second. Sometimes, a lot of the time is going to be below that, so it's going to fluctuate, but there are times when it will get up to that amount. The max acceleration is 30,000 millimeters per second squared. It has a direct drive extruder, and the hot end goes up to 300 degrees Celsius, and the bed goes up to 110 degrees Celsius. And as far as the build volume that you get, just because this is a big printer doesn't mean that you're going to be printing the biggest things that you've ever seen, because when you're looking at it from like left to right to front to back, it's only going to be like 260 millimeters, which is not much bigger than, say, a Bambu lab printer. Where you're going to be getting most of the extra space is on the Z as it's moving up, but you are not going to be printing as high as this chamber is. In fact, you're only going to be printing about 285 millimeters tall, just because of the way this whole Delta thing is designed. So it's not going to print until it reaches the tippy top, all right? It's going to be lower than that. But that 285 millimeters going up on the Z is going to be more than you would get with a regular traditional high-speed printer that you can buy on the market today. So after I got this all put together and I turned it on, it goes through a normal set of setup procedures. You connect to your Wi-Fi, and then if there's an update available, you can update the printer directly over the air using your Wi-Fi connection. And then you run through the calibrations. Now this does auto everything. It does your auto Z offset, it does your auto bed leveling, and it does your vibration compensation. It does all that itself so that you don't have to worry about it. And then at that point, you can begin printing. Now, before I show you the prints, it also comes with a little box of goodies. It comes standard with the 0.4 millimeter brass nozzle. So that means don't try to run abrasive materials through it, because it's going to eat up that brass nozzle pretty quickly. But you get this lubrication right here. You also get handy dandy glue stick. You get a bunch of Allen wrenches that you're going to need to put everything together. And then you also have inside here, there's a spare brass nozzle. I'm not going to take it out because it's so little, but you get a spare brass nozzle in here as well, and a little tiny PTFE tube as well. If you want to get a different nozzle that's hardened steel, then you're going to need a V6 nozzle. So you can just go online and buy one of those, and then you'll be able to take off the nozzle with a little wrench, and then you'll be able to put it on, and then you can print with abrasive materials. But because that hardened steel nozzle doesn't come with this printer, I did not use it to print those types of abrasive materials. Now, one of the things that this printer is known for is its 10-minute Benchy. That's right, you can print a Benchy in 10 minutes. And I wanted to see that for myself. So it came with a little unspooled sample filament in white, and I used that to print out the 10-minute Benchy, and it did in fact print out in 10 minutes. Here it is right here. I'll try to get some close-ups of everything that I'm going to show you so that you can see the quality for yourself. And I know that when you use white filament, it doesn't come out as well, so you can see all the details and stuff on it. But honestly, looking at this Benchy, it is not, in my opinion, a bad looking Benchy considering how fast it took to print. You might notice a little bit of funkiness on the back side where you see that porthole. It looks a little bit uneven, a little bit of filament coming down diagonally there. And then just kind of looking at the whole of the ship, you know, it's not the smoothest looking Benchy that I've ever seen in my life, but it's definitely not bad. And I can look at the bottom of it. You can still see the text on there. And for all intents and purposes, a little bit of stringing on the inside, but it's not a bad looking Benchy for 10 minutes compared to a Benchy that would normally take about 36 minutes to print. And there should be something up here so you can see the comparison between one of the Benchies that came off my Flash Forge printer. You can see the comparison between those two. And printing that Benchy also gave me a chance to see how the included camera looks and works with this printer. So there's this camera that's installed kind of like right near the bottom, and it's there for a couple of reasons. One, you can do some time lapses on it just with the press of a button on the touchscreen. it will just start the time lapse as you're printing. And you can also use that camera to remotely monitor the printer, because this runs Clipper, and it's not this version of Clipper that's like really locked down and won't actually let you do anything. You can just type in the IP address of your printer in your web browser, or you can go into like the FLSun Slicer, which is basically just Orca Slicer, but FLSun put their branding on it and put their profiles for their printers inside their own slicer. But you can go to the devices tab on that, put in the IP address, and then you'll have access to the web-based interface where you can do all the clippery stuff that you want to do. And the camera, I think, is surprisingly good on this printer. I didn't think it would be, but I like how they position the LED lighting on the inside. So when you're trying to monitor your prints, it's not backlit, your subject isn't backlit, it doesn't look blown out. It's actually a pretty decent looking camera, and the frame rate is around 9 to 11 frames per second. So it's not gonna be as smooth as like when you see me talking, but for monitoring purposes, I think that it does a pretty darn good job of it, and it's almost like you're looking at it in real time. Not quite, but it looks pretty darn good. So I'm happy that the camera is of good quality for this printer. And when the printer is doing its thing, it makes all of these like sounds that I have not heard in any 3D printer before. I mean, it really does seem like there's some type of robotic alien that's working everything, you know. It's like, crazy noises, but it's really cool to listen to, and it's really cool to look at as well. But one thing that is not so good is how loud this printer is. It is loud. And the T1 Pro is actually quieter than the original T1 that came out before it. They did some changes to make it quieter, but it is still plenty loud. For example, here in this space, I'm in a garage. This is where this printer has stayed the entire time. When I am printing and it's doing as fast as it can with high-speed PLA, I can hear the Z-hop thumping from this printer in my house, up the stairs, in the back room. Now, it's not like offensively loud at that distance, but the fact that I can still hear it tells you that this printer, yeah, it's plenty loud. So you can imagine how loud it is when you're standing right next to it. I mean, just listen to this thing. So if you don't have a large space or an isolated space where you can put this printer, I am warning you, it is so loud, it is going to drown out whatever you're trying to do in the same room with it, all right? So just be aware of that. I've seen some different mods and stuff that people have created to try to dampen the sound. There is no sound dampening STL that's on the USB stick that came with the printer that I have. I know that it's like that on some other printers, but I did not get that particular file. I'm not sure if this is the same version that could make use of that dampening thing, but I didn't get it, so I didn't use it. And this thing is loud, so just so you know, you need to be prepared for that. All right, so after the obligatory Benchy, I wanted to print something else, and I decided to start with the Torture Toaster. Now, this is a print that's going to help you see how well calibrated the printer is. It's going to test it for tolerances, and it's going to test it for stringing and all that good stuff. And I printed this in some high-speed blue PLA. And let me tell you exactly how long it took for me to print this. It took 2 hours and 44 minutes full size. Now, when I printed this previously on my FlashForge Adventurer 5M, it took that printer 5 hours and 27 minutes to print. So that's how much faster you're going to be getting. But how is the actual quality? Well, here you can take a look at it for yourself. And I think that the quality is just fine for considering how fast this printer was. You can still see the words printed quite clearly, Clock Spring 3D, hot makes, but how does it actually work? Well, here is the lever for the toast, and as you can see, it moves super duper smoothly. Now, I have not done anything to try to make it look better. I haven't cleaned it up or anything. I tried to keep everything just as it was when it came off the build plate, and this is super duper smooth, really good tolerances. And now we have this part here that you can just turn and open up this little door. And then here is where I ran into the first problem. So you can see that they have these little levers right here, and you're supposed to be able to move them to test the tolerances. However, a few of them did not connect to it. They were knocked away from the print as it was printing, most likely as a result of how fast it was moving. So the 0.3 did not connect to the toaster. The 0.4 did not connect to the toaster. And then I'm not sure what this little part is, but these were the three pieces that were left on the build plate. And what I'm left here with is a 0.5 and then the 0.1. 0.1 is not moving. It is pretty frozen in place. Maybe I can force it, but I shouldn't have to. But that one is not there. And then these ones in the middle aren't there. But the 0.5 is moving nice and smooth. So there's that. So we can lock this back down, turn it around to the other side, and then open up this compartment. And then this is where you're able to see the stringing. Now, there is some stringing here at these various degrees. So there is some stringing present. This filament was not dried. It was never dried. Perhaps that was a contributing factor. Maybe, maybe not. But this is a look on the inside of that. And then we can lock that down. But all in all, I think that for the most part, this torture toaster came out good. I like it. Tolerances were good. Now, I know that right now everybody is upset about the whole Benchy situation and the whole licensing thing around that, and we need to find something to replace the Benchy. So I tried out a couple of different things. Here is something here. This is the Battle Benchy that I found, the Forbidden Remixed Battle Benchy. And it came out okay, but it was a little bit of a failure here. I don't know if it was the print's fault or not, but this Battle Benchy has these cannons that are movable, and this cannon right here, well, you see it's a stringy mess. Maybe it needed a support right there. Maybe it didn't. I'm not sure, but here is the second little cannon that you can rotate. We've got some stringiness on the bottom. Again, that might have been a support issue for this remix, but everything else on this Battle Benchy looks all right. It's not perfect. We got a little bit of weirdness going on right here on the side of the ship, and then on the bottom you can see the text, and this is all printed in full speed. But for another calibration thing in the spirit of the Benchy is this right here, and this is called the Tooner. Now, the Tooner took me 25 minutes to print. On another printer like the Adventurer 5M, it would have taken 49 minutes to print. So this is kind of cool because it's got that spirit of the Benchy, but it's not quite the Benchy. Now, first, it has these two pontoons, I think they are, that print first on the bed, and you can see there's not a lot of surface area there. So coupled with that speed, a couple of times this just flew right off of the bed. I gave it a clean, I tried it again, and eventually it just worked. And this is how it printed out. And this is a pretty decent thing, I think, for calibrating the printer or seeing what it's capable of with its default settings. You see that we have some very thin strings, like right along here, that printed out pretty good. And the measurements that I tried to measure for different points of here, they seem to be pretty accurate. And one thing that you will notice is that the stringiness underneath the canopy, which the creator says is totally normal for a printer with its default settings to mess up on that point. It's a very common point of failure, and that just kind of helps you to determine what settings you might need to change in order to get that perfect bridging on this very difficult to print attribute of the Toonie. So it printed out well, it failed where it was normally expected to fail, and I think that it looks pretty good, you know, and everything was printed with full speed. All right, so those are our little boat prints. What are some other things that I printed on here? Well, terrain. All right, so terrain for your miniatures. Now, this is something that I printed out that did require supports, and this is where I ran into the issue of the printer can move so fast that sometimes it knocks off smaller, weaker supports. Now, it might ruin the print, it might not. For this particular print, there are some areas where you see like some filament is just sticking up like a needle, and that's where the support eventually got knocked off, but it had already supported what it needed to support, so it didn't ruin anything else, but it did happen. Here's the bottom right there. this looks pretty good, you know, and you can see the figures that are built into the wall here. I wouldn't be mad at this for tabletop terrain, but this is where I encountered that issue of smaller, thinner supports being knocked away during the print. And another thing that happened again with this little mask that I printed. Now the supports were located on the back, but as you can see, it's gotten a little bit of funkiness going on back here. And this was when the supports were being knocked away, and then we're left with these really sharp dangling filament strands that wouldn't have been there if the supports were allowed to stay there for as long as they could have been. Now, one thing that I tried to do to alleviate that is enable the Z-hop with a at 1 millimeter to see if that was going to help. Since I did that, I still had some issues with some supports being knocked off. It didn't seem to happen as often, but I think it helped a little bit. So just know that you might want to turn down the speed a little bit. You can do that on the screen there by percentages so that you can, you know, probably get a better quality print and so that you don't knock your supports off. But that is something that you should definitely be aware of. Now, going back to prints that move, I know that some people are sick of Flexi Dragons, but the people love Flexi Dragons. So darn it, I'm gonna print a Flexi Dragon. And that's what I did here. No problems with this Flexi Dragon. It was printed with silk PLA. I ran it just like regular high-speed PLA. I didn't even change it. And it came out just, I mean, it turned out great. You can see the close-ups for yourself. This Flexi Dragon just turned out great. Absolutely no problem with this at all. I was just very happy with it. Now, for some comparisons between some other printers. Now, here's a helmet piece that I want to show you. So I printed this here, and it took about 7 hours and 45 minutes to print. Previously, I tried to print the exact same thing on the Bambu Lab A1, and it was going to take twice the amount of time. And unfortunately, on the Bambu Lab A1, it eventually failed here. So I think it failed because I used grid infill. I shouldn't have done that, and it eventually just knocked it loose. But the point is to try to look at the quality of this as best you can, because I know that this is white filament, but they are not the same white filament. This one was done in some, I think it was in Slogic matte PLA, and this was done here, the one that actually finished successfully, was done in some Sunlu white PLA. Now the Sunlu white PLA, the one that I use, it's a little bit translucent. It's not as deep of a white as this. You can kind of see through it a little bit, but if you just take a closer look at these and you're like looking at the different like layer lines and stuff, maybe it has to do with the filament, but I can see some more pronounced lines and I can actually feel them right here near the bottom that was printed on the Bambu Lab A1, but compared to the FLSun, that's not there. You know, and if I'm being completely honest, it looks cleaner on the FLSun than it does on the Bambu Lab A1. Now, maybe that's a filament thing. I don't know, but I printed it at full speed and this came out looking good. I mean, it's not absolutely perfect. It has the hallmarks of FDM printing, you know, got a little bit of ringing right there and it's a part of a helmet, so some finishing is needed. But besides that, I mean, this looks good. This looks smooth. You know, no problem. There were supports all in here and I did a little test fit to see if everything was going to fit together, and it absolutely will. So while this was printed on this printer, the top part of the mask wasn't, and you know, it still goes together just fine. So I was actually shocked that I found something that actually turned out better than it did on my Bambu Lab A1. Shocking. I know. I didn't think that that was going to happen. So I tried to print with some other filaments as well. TPU is a filament that I tried. It was some Slogic white TPU, and I printed this little cat-sized Black Panther helmet. And this took like 22 hours to print. And because it's TPU, this is not going to print TPU naturally any faster than another printer. It's just going to print it slow. And I just used the FLSun default profile. And take a look at it. Look at the detail along the side of the mask. That looks pretty good, I think. Now, removing the supports left some imperfections down here at the bottom. This is all from the supports, but you can see like the little tiny holes right there at the front of the mask. Those came out looking pretty good. And as usual, it gets funky once you get to the top of the head. You know, you got that circular ringing, you know, but I printed this with the supports around the outside, no support going up the middle. So it looks gnarly when you go like straight up at the top of the dome. Normal, it happens with all printers. This came out good, I think. Surprisingly, I mean, this TPU printed nice and slow. Helmets, full-size helmet. This Mandalorian helmet. I think this was for one of the lady Mandalorians. This was printed with silk PLA, and I actually did a live stream when I was printing this particular helmet. This helmet took 7 hours and 33 minutes to print. If I tried to print this on my Bambu Lab A1, it would not have fit. Now I scaled this down to 90.04% in order to get it to fit in here. I had to scale it down even more for it to fit on the Bambu Lab build plate, and that would have taken it 14 hours on the Bambu Lab A1. So this was done with the silk PLA, and I said during that live stream, I wonder that if I had used just regular PLA, could the finish have come out better? I'm not sure, but as you can see, along the sides, I mean, it's not perfect. It's not perfect. This definitely needs some finishing. We got that big seam line coming down right there. We've got that ringing on the top, and then just along the sides, I mean, it's okay, but it definitely needs some work. It needs to be sanded right along here. There's sharpness right around there. There's sharpness down here. This is where the supports were. On the side is where the little ear pieces or whatever goes. I tried to print this. The orientation was bad, so this looks ugly. I would not blame the printer for that because it was just really bad orientation, and I need to take this off. Here we go. So yeah, I wouldn't even worry about this. This was just bad orientation. It looks ugly. But this helmet itself, it needs finishing, but this finished printing in 7 hours and 33 minutes. And I didn't think that this would fit me, but it does fit me. Look at that. This helmet actually does fit me. Isn't that crazy? 7 hours and 33 minutes. And it comes off pretty smooth too. You know, kudos to the designer. Maybe they did something different, but this actually goes over my head. So technically it's a full-size helmet that I printed in 7 hours and 33 minutes. You're probably not going to be able to do that with the majority of full-size helmets, but it worked out just fine for this. And dude, I mean, you can't beat that. 7 hours and 33 minutes for a helmet that you can put on? Come on, dude. That's just cool. One of the other things I was curious about is what does the printer do if you wanted to change out filaments and get different colors? This is not technically it's not a multicolor printer. There's no AMS or anything that is comparable to that will work with this. So I just wanted to see how it would work on the regular interface. And what I discovered is that you can just go into the slicer, put a pause where you want the pause to be, and the effector or the tool head is going to stop and is going to move towards the front of the plate. Is going to stay relatively low, and you have the ability to use the touchscreen to have it take the filament out. You don't have to cut anything. It just backs the filament out. You can just simply pull it up, and then you can load your filament in. You can have it extrude some out, and then it's going to go right back to printing. Now, the downside of doing that is that the nozzle doesn't get cleaned or anything. So as the effector is moving back to print with another color or even with the same color, there can be a little bit of filament left on the nozzle, and it's going to plop it right where it needs to start. And that's going to leave a little bit of an imperfection on the print that you may be able to just pull off or snip off, but if you can't do that, it'll just leave a little imperfection. But I did print this so that you can get a sense of what that would look like. So this is this really cool Pikachu, and this is done in different layers. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 different layers that were printed in different color filaments, and you combine them all in order to get this. It's kind of like a really cool kind of like 3D effect. And you can see where the printer had changed the filament, where I changed the filament and it went back to print. And you can see like that little strand of green filament kind of sticking out like that. that, that's where it plopped down that last little bit of filament before it went printing the rest. So it did it right there. Here's another spot where it did it, and there was another spot on Pikachu's cheek where just a little bit of that filament plopped down. So that's something that you are interested in doing and wanting to know how it's going to affect your prints if you change filament in the middle of a print. That's what's going to happen. It might leave a little bit of deposited filament that you may or may not be able to just get off easily and not have to worry about the quality afterwards. All right, so I know I spent quite a bit of time showing you prints, but you know, at the end of the day, I think that that's the most important thing to show when it comes to a printer. How does it print? You can see some examples right here. Now, let me tell you some things that I have experienced with the printer itself outside of the prints. All right, so let's go for some, well, let's start with some cons first. Now, the biggest con is that it's loud. All right, it's just a loud printer, and it's so loud, it's not something that I will put inside of my house. It's just too loud for that. And I think that can be very off-putting. So if you want this printer, you need to put it in a space by itself. As far as any bugs that I've encountered, I have encountered some bugs. One bug that I encountered was a reset. It crashed. I was printing this shoe rack in nylon, and it was 96% complete when the effector just stopped where it was, and then the printer reset itself. It restarted, and when it came back, it asked me if I wanted to resume the print. So the power loss recovery thing, that works. And it started the print where it left off, and it did finish it. However, it did leave an imperfection in the spot where it stopped in the first place. I don't know why that happened, but it happened, so I'm telling you about it. Another thing that I've noticed is, not a lot of times, you know, but 95% of the time I've had no problems. But there was this other time when, even though the bed was level, the Z offset for some reason just wasn't having it. And it was just kind of sputtering the filament too high off of the bed. Don't know why. I stopped the print. I re-leveled the bed. I went to print it again. It printed just fine. Don't know why that happened. Maybe there was some filament sticking out and it screwed up the Z calibration. I don't know, but that's something that happened. Also had a couple of clipper failures. I was trying to monitor the print remotely, got an error on the screen, came down here and saw that everything was just kind of frozen, stuck. So I had to turn off the power and turn it back on in order to get it to work again. There was another situation where Clipper crashed during the bed leveling process. Again, had to turn it off, turn it back on, and then it resumed as normal. These bugs I encountered were not numerous. They were pretty spread apart, but they did happen. So I just wanted to tell you about it. Another thing that you might notice is on the inside, putting the spool of filament in this printer, it works, though it is kind of janky. Everything is, the spool is held up by like a big Allen wrench, basically. But there is a potential issue when you're done printing and it goes up. Because of how the filament is, there's a chance that the filament might go behind the spool, and that can cause a tangle. And that might be an issue. And I think that actually did happen to me one time. I didn't see it with my own eyes, but I had tried to look at the printer and it told me it ran out of filament. I came back down here and saw that the filament had been split. It had been ripped off of the spool. And so there was no more filament going into the top of the effector. And I think that was because it had got caught up at some point during this whole process. So just kind of have to keep your eye on that, because that's something that can happen and it will happen most likely. And then another thing is with the FLSun slicer. Now, I don't necessarily have a problem with the slicer in and of itself, because like I said, it works just like, it is Orca slicer. So I'm already very familiar with how it goes, and it works. The problem is that the fact that it has to exist in the first place. I think that we have gotten to the point where a lot of people don't want to have branded slicers for different printing companies. It'll be great if we can just all use Orca slicer, because it's obvious that you guys like Orca slicer so much. That's why you base your slicer on it. But don't force us to have different versions of Orca slicer for different printers. Just let us just use Orca slicer. Import your profiles there. You can import profiles for this printer into Orca slicer, but I've just been using their regular slicer because they got everything there for me, and it's been working out just fine. I'm not too broken up about it. I'm not too upset about it, but I know some people will be. So, let's just try to, compartmentalize this and just have one slicer to rule them all, because Orca Slicer is the bee's knees. That's why everybody likes it. So that's great. They also have their own app that just came out. I think it's called like FLSun World or something like that you can download on iOS or Android. It'll let you control certain aspects of the printer. You'll be able to monitor it and all that stuff. When I wanted to use an app, I just use Octo app. It works just fine. Put in the IP address and then you have access to all the different features that it has, and that's also free. But then again, you can also just go to your browser and type in the IP address for the printer, and then you'll have that cool interface right there. It might be Mainsail, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that, but you can see everything from there. You can monitor your print. You can see all the different things it's doing, all the fancy numbers, and make all those changes. If you're in that technical side of things, you can totally do it from there. So if you want to download the FLSun World app, you can, but there are alternatives out there that you can use as well to get you pretty much the same thing. So all in all, as I stand here in this cold space, I gotta say, I don't know why FLSun would have tried to sort of control the narrative when it comes to this type of printer, because there was no need to do that. My experience with this printer has been good. It really has been good. And just look at the prints that I made that I'm showing you, and I am happy with it considering how freaking fast this printer is. So sometimes you just got to let the product speak for itself. You don't have to try to get someone to tell someone that something is good when you're not completely convinced of it yourself. Just let the hardware do the talking, because it's done a good job. There's been some software bugs here and there that, that's kind of weird. It happens. It happens with all of my printers from time to time. As long as it's not constant and consistent, then hey, I just roll with it. It just kind of comes with the territory. But I have to tell you, when it comes to me needing to print something that's a single color and I just want it to be done fast, I'm going to put it on this because it's going to get it done super quickly. If I need to print something that's like abrasive, I'm going to go somewhere else unless I get like a hardened steel nozzle. But if I don't do that, then I'm just going to use one of my Flash Force printers to do the abrasive stuff. And when I want super nicely detailed things, especially if it's going to be multicolor, then it's going to be the Bambu Lab A1. But for things that are functional, or maybe if you don't care too much about how it looks, and even if you do care about how it looks, but you just want it to be done quicker, maybe you can deal with some funkiness here and there, this is a good printer for it. In all honesty, it is a good printer for it. It's just so freaking big. And I think the reason why printers like this aren't commonplace right now is because they're so big and because they're so loud. And people just don't want to have something that's, larger than a standard mini fridge in their house, blowing them out of the room so that they can 3D print something. This is a 3D printer for people who like 3D printers, and maybe not necessarily for people who like 3D printing, because there's a lot more attractive options out there that'll give you that good size that's not so unwieldy, because it's a weird shape, it's kind of awkward to try to pick up and carry, and it's much more symmetrical with other printers, so you'll be able to put more of them next to each other, and it's less hassle to have to deal with those than this thing right here. And if something goes wrong, then it's more things to go wrong with this types of setup. There's so many different moving parts. It's more complicated. So it's cool, but I think that this is something for people who like printers, and it is not your first printer, something that you will have to say, man, look at this thing, huh? You ever seen something like this? It's cool, isn't it? It's definitely for those types of people. And I'm one of those people, so I like this printer. So that is going to do it for now. If you have any questions about this, please let me know down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them as best as I can. And yeah, I want to thank FLSun for sending me this so that I can try it out. And guys, just trust your products, man. Trust your products. I had a good experience with it. So just believe in yourself, and the rest will speak for itself. All right, so that's going to do it for now. Thank you all so much for watching. Till next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll speak to you soon.